Hi everyone. I just wanted to go over some review of chapter 9.1 just to make sure you're okay with your homework. This isn't going to be the best video because I'm actually holding my phone while I do this. So next time hopefully I'll have a stand that I can use and be able to do this better. But I want to make sure you remember a couple of things. Perfect squares, remember? I had you made a list of perfect squares up to the square root of 400. Hopefully you were able to do that successfully and that helped you with the first part of your homework. So when you're doing questions 13 through 23, those were perfect squares. I want to make sure that you understand there's a difference between the square root of 36 and the negative square root of 36. And when you see positive negative square root of 36. All of those are asking for something different. This one is just simply asking you for the positive square root of 36, which we know to be 6. This one is saying to you, take the square root of 36, which is 6, and attach the negative, because really what this means is negative 1 times the square root of 36, which is equal to negative 1 times 6, which is equal to negative 6. This problem is, what is the positive negative square root of 36? And your answer would be positive negative 6. And that's how you would write it. So that is the first part of your homework. The other part that's in 13 through 23 has to do with decimals. So I'm hoping when you watched the video that I posted for 9.1 that you were able to do those decimal problems. You had one in particular, question number 23, which was the square root of 2 and 25 hundredths. So when you do that one, think of it being the square root of 225, which is 15. Then think about where you need to place that decimal in order to force you to move it 2 places to make it 25 hundredths. So first I would say, do this. What is the square root of 225? You would say 15. Then I'd say, all right, I have to be able to move the decimal 2 places. In order for me to do that, I would need to multiply 1 5/10 times 1 5/10. That would get me 2 and 25 hundredths. Okay? So that's the first part of your homework. The next part, 25 through 31, those were not perfect squares. And in your homework, it says use a calculator. But I said I didn't want you to use a calculator. I want you to be able to estimate approximately what that decimal would be. So for example, on question number 25, this is question number 25. You have the square root of 56. So when you do the square root of 56, I want you to think about what 2 perfect squares is this between. So you would say it's between the square root of what 2 perfect squares? So it's between the square root of 49 and the square root of 64. So it's between 7 and 8, right? It's between those 2 perfect squares. So I want you to think about the square root of 56 now. Is it closer to 49? Or is it closer to 64? Or is it right in the middle? It's kind of right in the middle, because I want you to think about how many numbers exist between 49 and 56. 7, and how many numbers exist between 56 and 64? The same amount. So this is why we can say that this is approximately 7 and 5/10. Okay, we know it's not. We know it goes on forever and ever because that is an irrational number. These are rational numbers. This is irrational that goes on forever. It said in your homework assignment to round to the nearest 10th. So that's how you were supposed to do questions 25 through 31. Then when you get to questions 35 to 45 in your homework for 9.1, you are supposed to estimate which is it closest to in a whole number. And it says do not use a calculator. So if I did a question like 35, and it said the square root of 79, again, I want you to think about what two perfect squares is that between. It's between the square root of 64 and the square root of 81. And wouldn't you say that it's closer to the square root of 81? So it's closer to being 9 than it is to being 8. So that's why we would estimate the square root of 79 to be approximately 9 as its whole number. Okay? So this one, remember, we said was approximately 7 5/10. Because remember, question 25 said round to the nearest tenth. Question 35 said round to the nearest whole number. So that's how you're going to do those. I also see that you might have a problem with question number 51. I want you to remember that a square helps us develop that square root. And remember, a square, all sides are equal, okay? So if I told you that this side was 4 units, then you can say all sides are 4 units. And if I said to you, what is the area of the square? Area of a square is equal to side times side, which I prefer to write it as side to the second power, okay? So if I said the side is equal to 4, then you're going to go the area is equal to 4 squared, which is equal to 16 units squared, okay? So in your homework, it gave you a square, and it said to you, let's pretend like we have one that says 100 inches squared. And I said, okay, what's the measurement of each side of the square? Well, area is equal to side squared. So if I know that the area is equal to 100, the only way to get rid of a square is to square root it. So I'm going to square root both sides of this to find out that the side is equal to 10 units. Okay, so look at how I did that problem. So when you look at question number 51, it says 109 inches square. So 51 gives you a square and says it's 109 inches squared. Your job is to say the area is equal to side squared. Undo it by taking the square root. It says estimate to the nearest tenth. So we go back to what I showed you previously, and you find out what two perfect squares is this between. It's between 10 and 11, right? It's definitely closer to 10, and it's not halfway. And halfway would be 10.5. So I can't say approximately 10.5 because it's not halfway. It's closer to 100, so I'm going to say more like 10 4/10 of an inch would be my estimate. So I would say side is equal to 10 4/10 of a unit, right there. Actually, it's inches. Sorry. Okay, so that's the basis of your homework from this page. Here are the solutions for each of those problems. I hope that you checked your answers and know that if you have questions, you could definitely email me or wait till I come back on Friday and we can go over some of this more. And I'm going to be posting a video for 9.2 after this.